The trade station floated in the darkness of space like a massive wheel turning slowly against the stars. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its ports every day, bringing goods and people from across the galaxy. The station had stood for 30 years in the neutral zone, a place where any species could meet without fear of war or conflict. Its metal corridors had seen peaceful traders, curious scientists, and careful diplomats from hundreds of different worlds. Kate Morrison walked through the main corridor of the station, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. She was 26 years old and had been working in the diplomatic corps for 2 years. Her job was to meet with alien species and help them feel comfortable on the human-run station. Most days this meant showing visitors where to find food that would not poison them, or explaining why humans liked to shake hands when they met. Today was different. Today the Vrexians were coming. Kate had read everything she could find about the Vrexians in the station database. They came from a planet with twice the gravity of Earth. Their world was hot and dangerous, filled with creatures that would give nightmares to most humans. The Vrexians had evolved as the top predators on their planet. Nothing hunted them. They hunted everything else. She stopped at a window that looked out into space. Her reflection stared back at her, showing a woman with brown hair tied back in a practical bun and dark circles under her eyes from too many sleepless nights. She had volunteered for this assignment because someone had to do it. And most of her colleagues had suddenly remembered important work elsewhere when the Vrexian ship appeared on the station sensors. The communication from the Vrexian ambassador had been brief and cold. They were coming to discuss trade agreements. They would bring their families as a sign of peaceful intentions. Kate knew enough about alien customs to understand what that meant. The Vrexians never brought their young to dangerous places. If they brought their children, it meant they believed the station was safe. The problem was that everyone else on the station did not feel safe around the Vrexians. Kate watched through the window as the Vrexian ship approached the docking bay. It was not like human ships, which were built for comfort and efficiency. The Vrexian vessel looked like a weapon, all sharp angles and dark metal. It moved through space with the same deadly grace that its creators possessed. Her communicator beeped. "Lieutenant Morrison, the Vrexian ship has docked. They are requesting to disembark." Kate took a deep breath. "Tell them I will meet them at the airlock." She made her way to the docking area, passing other station residents who quickly moved out of her path. Word had spread fast. The maintenance crews had cleared the corridors leading from the docking bay, and security officers stood at careful distances with their hands near their weapons. The airlock door opened with a hiss of air pressure equalizing. The first Vrexian to step through was massive. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body covered in scales that looked like polished black stone. His eyes were yellow with vertical slits for pupils, and they tracked every movement in the corridor with the focus of a hunter. Claws tipped each finger, long and curved and sharp enough to cut through metal. When he breathed, Kate could see rows of teeth designed for tearing meat. This was Ambassador Krelthar, and he terrified every instinct Kate had developed over millions of years of human evolution. "Ambassador," Kate said, keeping her voice steady. "Welcome to Station Kepler 7. I'm Lieutenant Kate Morrison. I will be your liaison during your stay." Krelthar looked down at her. His gaze was cold and calculating. "You are small," he said. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Your species is soft. Why did they send you to meet us?" Kate had prepared for this. "Because I volunteered, Ambassador, and because I believe that peaceful relations between our species are important." Something that might have been amusement flickered in the Vrexian's eyes. Brave or foolish, sometimes they are the same thing. More Vrexians emerged from the ship. Kate counted 6 adults and 1 juvenile. The young one was smaller than the adults but still taller than Kate. His scales were darker, almost black, and his claws were not yet fully developed. He stayed close to Ambassador Krelthar, watching everything with bright, curious eyes. "This is my offspring, Scarix," Krelthar said, gesturing to the young Vrexian. "He has seen 20 seasons. Old enough to learn, young enough to still have much to discover." Kate nodded to Scarix. The young Vrexian stared at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, but she held his gaze. In the files she had read, backing down from a Vrexian's stare was seen as weakness. She was not going to start this relationship by showing fear. "I have prepared quarters for your delegation," Kate said, turning to lead them down the corridor. "They have been modified to accommodate your environmental needs. The gravity in your section has been increased, and the temperature raised to match your comfort levels. As they walked, Kate noticed that the other species on the station quickly moved out of sight. A group of Talarians, usually bold traders who feared nothing, practically ran into a side corridor. Even the station's security chief, who Kate knew had faced combat situations, kept a respectful distance. Only the humans seemed relatively calm, though Kate suspected that was because they were good at hiding their fear. They reached the diplomatic quarters, which occupied an entire section of the station. Kate keyed in the access codes and the doors slid open. The Vrexians filed inside, their movements silent despite their size and weight. "The conference room is through there," Kate said, pointing. "We have prepared meals according to the nutritional data you sent ahead. If you need anything, you can contact me directly." Krelthar nodded. "We will rest and then we will talk about trade. Your station has resources my people need. We have resources you need. This can be beneficial for both." The Vrexian delegation moved deeper into their quarters. Kate was about to leave when she noticed Scarix had stayed behind. The young Vrexian was looking around the corridor with obvious interest. His tail, thick and powerful, swept back and forth behind him. "Scarix," Krelthar called from inside the quarters. His tone carried clear command. The young Vrexian's head snapped toward his father's voice, but Kate saw something in his eyes. A flash of what looked like disappointment. She recognized that look. She had seen it on her nephew's face when her brother called him inside from playing in the yard. Scarix turned and followed his father, but not before glancing back at the corridor one more time. Kate made her way back to the human quarters, her mind working. The negotiations would begin tomorrow. The Vrexians wanted access to the rare metals that humans had found in the asteroid belt near the station. Humans wanted access to the biological compounds that the Vrexians had developed, medicines that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. It should have been a simple trade negotiation. But nothing was ever simple when dealing with predator species that viewed the galaxy through the lens of hunter and prey. That night, Kate could not sleep. She kept thinking about young Scarix and the look in his eyes. She had spent years volunteering at animal shelters on Earth before joining the diplomatic corps. She had worked with dogs, cats, and even a few exotic animals that people had tried to keep as pets. She knew what a bored, curious young creature looked like, and Scarix had looked bored. She sat up in bed and pulled up the Vrexian cultural files on her tablet. She read about their education system, their social structures, their approach to raising their young. Everything was focused on training, on preparing the next generation to be strong and capable predators. There was no mention of recreation, of play, of anything that was not directly related to survival or dominance. Kate thought about her childhood, about playing fetch with her family's dog in the backyard, about teaching that dog to be gentle, to bring the ball back without biting down too hard, about the bond that formed through those simple games. She wondered if anyone had ever taught a Vrexian to play. The thought was ridiculous. The Vrexians were apex predators from a death world. They did not play games with other species. They barely played games with their own kind. But Kate could not shake the image of Scarix looking around the corridor with those curious eyes, his tail moving with barely contained energy. Tomorrow the negotiations would begin. Tomorrow she would focus on trade agreements and cultural exchanges and all the important diplomatic work that needed to be done. But in the back of her mind, Kate was already wondering about the young Vrexian who looked like he wanted to explore, to discover, to do something other than stand silent and still beside his father. She just did not know yet how that curiosity would change everything. The diplomatic meetings began the next morning in the station's largest conference room. Kate arrived early to make sure everything was arranged correctly. The Vrexian side of the table had been reinforced to support their weight, and the chairs had been replaced with platforms that better suited their posture. The temperature in the room had been raised to match their comfort levels, which meant Kate would be sweating by the end of the day. Ambassador Krelthar entered with his full delegation. The adult Vrexians moved with purpose, their claws clicking on the floor. Young Scarix followed behind his father, taking a position slightly to the left where he could observe everything. The human delegation consisted of Commander Jake Sullivan, who ran station security, and Dr. Helen Foster, who specialized in biological compounds and medical research. They both tried very hard not to stare at the massive predators across the table. though Kate noticed Helen's hand trembled slightly when she opened her datapad. The negotiations began with careful formality. Krelthar spoke about his people's need for the rare metals found in the asteroid belt. He explained how these metals were crucial for their shipbuilding efforts and technological development. His voice remained flat and emotionless, presenting facts without any attempt at persuasion or charm. Dr. Foster responded by discussing the medical compounds the Vrexians had developed, particularly the ones that showed promise in treating human neurological diseases. Her voice grew steadier as she focused on the science, her passion for her work overcoming her fear. Kate watched and took notes, ready to step in if cultural misunderstandings arose. But mostly she found herself watching Scarix. The young Vrexian sat perfectly still as he had been trained to do. His scales did not move, his tail remained motionless, and his eyes stayed fixed on the speakers. To anyone else, he might have looked completely focused on the proceedings, but Kate noticed the small signs, the way his claws would flex slightly every few minutes, the way his eyes would dart to the door whenever someone passed by in the corridor outside, the way his tail tip would twitch just barely. When the discussion dragged on about mineral extraction rates and compound synthesis processes, he was bored out of his mind. The first day of negotiations ended after 6 hours of careful discussion. Progress had been made, but both sides were cautious. Trust had to be built slowly between species that had only recently made contact. Krelthar stood, and his delegation followed. Scarix rose with the others, but Kate saw him glance around the conference room one more time before following his father out. She recognized that look too. It was the same look her nephew had when he had to sit through long family dinners, waiting for the moment when the adults would finally stop talking and he could go do something interesting. The second day followed the same pattern. The adults discussed terms and conditions while Scarix sat in perfect stillness that Kate now recognized as the result of strict training, rather than actual interest. During one particularly long discussion about shipping routes, she saw him stare at a small maintenance light that was blinking on the wall. He watched it blink on and off for nearly 10 minutes with an intensity that suggested he was desperately trying to find something, anything to occupy his mind. On the third day, Kate made a decision that would later be questioned by every security officer on the station. During a break in the negotiations, while the adults gathered in small groups to discuss specific points, she approached Scarix. The young Vrexian watched her come closer. His body tensed slightly, not in threat but in surprise. None of the other humans had approached him directly. They had been polite but had kept their distance. "These meetings must be very boring for you," Kate said quietly. Scarix looked at her with those yellow eyes. For a moment he said nothing. Then, in a voice that was deeper than a human his age but still held some youthful quality, he replied, "I am here to learn." "You can learn by listening," Kate said, "but you can also learn by experiencing. The station has many areas you might find interesting. Engineering sections, observation decks, the hydroponics gardens where we grow food. You are welcome to explore during the breaks if your father allows it." Something flickered in Scarix's eyes, interest quickly hidden. "My father believes I should stay close. To observe how diplomacy works. Diplomacy also involves understanding the places and people you are negotiating with," Kate pointed out. "How can you understand this station if you only see one conference room?" Before Scarix could respond, Krelthar's voice cut across the room. "Scarix." The young Vrexian immediately turned toward his father, who gestured for him to return to his side. Scarix obeyed without question, but as he walked away, Kate thought she saw the slightest movement of his tail, a small gesture that might have been frustration. The negotiations continued for another 3 hours. By the time they ended, Kate's clothes were soaked with sweat from the high temperature, and her brain felt like it was melting from listening to discussions about molecular structures and trade, percentages. She was making her way back to the human quarters when the station's alarm system activated, not the full emergency alarm but the warning signal that indicated a problem that needed immediate attention. Kate's communicator crackled. "Lieutenant Morrison, we have a situation in Corridor 7B. One of the maintenance drones has been attacked." Kate felt her stomach drop. "Attacked? By what?" There was a pause. "By the young Vrexian, ma'am. He has the drone and he is not letting it go." Kate ran. Corridor 7B was normally a quiet section of the station, used mainly by maintenance crews accessing the environmental systems. By the time Kate arrived, a crowd had gathered at a safe distance. Security officers had their hands on their weapons but had not drawn them. Everyone was watching the scene in the middle of the corridor. Scarix crouched over a maintenance drone, his body low to the ground in a posture Kate recognized from nature documentaries about big cats. The drone was a simple cleaning unit, round and low to the ground with brushes and sensors for navigating the station corridors. It was currently on its side, its wheels spinning uselessly in the air. The young Vrexian had the drone gripped in his claws. His tail lashed behind him and he was making a sound deep in his throat. A growl, resonant and powerful, that sent shivers down Kate's spine and made every person in the corridor take an involuntary step backward. Security Chief Jake Sullivan stood at the front of the crowd, his hand on his weapon. "Lieutenant, we need to call Ambassador Krelthar. This situation could escalate." Kate looked at the scene more carefully. Scarix was not trying to destroy the drone. He was not ripping it apart or crushing it. He had caught it, and now he was holding it like a prize, growling over it like a predator protecting its kill. But his tail movements were wrong for a real threat. They were excited, almost playful. His growls had a rhythm to them that reminded Kate of something, though she could not quite place what. Then it clicked. She had heard sounds like that before at the animal shelter. When puppies played tug-of-war with toys, they would growl and shake their heads, but their tails would wag, and their bodies would be loose and happy. The growls were not threats. They were excitement. "Nobody call the ambassador yet," Kate said. Jake looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Lieutenant, that is a Vrexian juvenile. He is still dangerous." "He is also a kid who just caught something that was moving," Kate replied. "And he is bored and probably frustrated from sitting still in meetings for 3 days straight." She started walking towards Scarix. The security officers tensed. Kate heard Jake say her name in a warning tone, but she did not stop. She kept her movements slow and steady, her posture relaxed. Years of working with scared and aggressive animals at the shelter had taught her that body language mattered more than words. Scarix's head snapped up as she approached. His growl deepened, becoming more resonant. His claws tightened on the drone and his body tensed. The message was clear in any language. "This is mine. Stay back." Kate stopped about 10 feet away. She met his eyes calmly and spoke in a steady voice. "That is station property. You cannot keep it." Scarix's tail lashed harder. He shifted his weight, preparing to defend his prize if necessary. Kate could see every muscle in his body coiled and ready. One wrong move and he could cross the distance between them in a heartbeat. The corridor had gone completely silent. Even the environmental system seemed to have stopped humming. Everyone watched, waiting to see if the small human was about to be mauled by a predator from a death world. Kate took another step forward. Then another. She kept her breathing even and her hands visible at her sides. She was not trying to sneak or surprise him. She was simply walking forward with complete confidence. Scarix growled again, louder this time. But Kate noticed something. His claws had not extended further. His body had not shifted into an attack posture. He was warning her, yes, but he had not decided to fight. Not yet. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that she could have reached out and touched his scales. This was the moment everything could go wrong. This was the moment when every security protocol said she should back away and call for help. Instead, Kate reached down and put her hands on the drone. Kate stood in the middle of the corridor holding the damaged maintenance drone, very aware that every security camera on the station was recording this moment. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching her, waiting to see what would happen next. Behind her, she heard Jake Sullivan slowly moving closer, probably ready to pull her away if the Vrexian juvenile attacked. But Kate was not looking at the security officers. She was looking at the drone in her hands, turning it over as if it was the most interesting thing she had ever seen. One of its wheels was bent, and the casing had several deep scratches from Scarix's claws, but the basic structure was intact. Scarix remained crouched on the floor, his yellow eyes fixed on the drone. His head tilted slightly, and Kate recognized that gesture. Confusion. He had let her take the drone, but now he did not understand what she was doing with it. Kate made a decision that would later be analyzed by xenobiologists across half the galaxy. She looked at Scarix, made sure she had his full attention, and then turned away from him. She faced down the long corridor. drew her arm back and threw the drone as hard as she could. The damaged machine clattered across the polished floor, its remaining wheels spinning as it bounced and skidded. The sound echoed through the corridor loud in the shocked silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Scarix remained frozen in place, staring at the fleeing object. His body had tensed the instant the drone started moving, every predator instinct focusing on the prey that was escaping. Then Kate said one word. Fetch. She did not know if Scarix understood human speech beyond what the translators provided. She did not know if the word would mean anything to him. But she said it in that particular tone that every dog owner in human history has used, that mix of command and encouragement and invitation to play. Scarix exploded into motion. His powerful legs launched him forward so fast that several people in the corridor gasped and stepped back. He covered the distance to the drone in seconds, his claws extended for traction on the smooth floor. He pounced on the machine with all the grace and power of an apex predator taking down prey. But something was different. Kate watched carefully as Scarix grabbed the drone. He was not attacking it. He was not trying to destroy it. He picked it up in his jaws carefully and shook it once with satisfaction. The growl that came from his throat was different from before. It was excited, triumphant but not aggressive. The security officers had their hands on their weapons now, unsure what to do. Jake Sullivan moved up beside Kate. "Lieutenant, what are you doing?" "Wait," Kate said quietly. "Just wait." Scarix stood over his recaptured prize, the drone held firmly in his jaws. His tail was raised high behind him, sweeping back and forth in wide arcs. His whole body language had changed. The tension was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like joy. Then he did something that made Ambassador Krelthar, who had just arrived at the scene, stop dead in his tracks. Scarix trotted back toward Kate. He moved with a bouncing gait that was nothing like the deadly silent stalking of a Vrexian hunter. His tail was up, his head was high, and the drone was still clenched carefully in his jaws. He came right up to Kate and dropped the drone at her feet. Then he looked up at her, and Kate saw in his eyes something that transcended species and language, anticipation, excitement, the universal expression of a young creature who has just discovered a game and wants to play it again. The corridor was completely silent. Kate could hear her own breathing, could hear the soft hum of the station's environmental systems. Every person watching seemed to be holding their breath. Kate bent down and picked up the drone. It was wet with saliva and had a few more dents, but it was still in one piece. She looked at Scarix, who was practically vibrating with energy. His claws flexed against the floor and his tail swept faster. She threw the drone again. Scarix bolted after it with even more enthusiasm than before. This time he knew the game. He knew the drone would move, knew he could chase it, knew he could catch it. He pounced with precision, grabbed it, shook it, and immediately turned back toward Kate. He brought it back faster this time, dropping it at her feet with a proud rumble. His whole body language screamed, "Play again, play again, play again." Kate threw it a third time, and a fourth, and a fifth. Each time Scarix chased with obvious joy. Each time he brought it back to her. Each time his growls became less threatening and more excited. By the sixth throw, something remarkable happened. Other people in the corridor started to relax. A few of them actually moved closer to watch. The security officers slowly took their hands away from their weapons. Even Jake Sullivan, who had been ready to intervene, stood with his arms crossed and a look of wonder on his face. Ambassador Krelthar watched his son play fetch with a human. And for the first time since arriving at the station, his expression showed something other than cold calculation. It showed complete and total shock. Kate threw the drone one more time. Scarix chased it with the same boundless energy, caught it and brought it back. But this time when he dropped it at her feet, he sat back on his haunches and looked up at her. His tongue was slightly out and he was breathing hard from the exertion. Kate had seen that exact expression on hundreds of dogs at the shelter. The universal look of, "I am having so much fun and I am a little bit tired, but I want to keep playing." She picked up the drone and examined it. The machine was definitely beyond repair now. It would need to be completely replaced. But as far as Kate was concerned, it was the best use of station equipment she had ever seen. "Good boy," she said, the words coming automatically from years of working with animals. Scarix tilted his head at the praise. He might not have understood the exact words, but he understood the tone. His tail swept once, twice in what could only be happiness. Ambassador Krelthar finally found his voice. "What is the meaning of this?" Kate turned to face the massive Rexian, very aware that she had just engaged in unauthorized interaction with a diplomatic envoy's child. "Your son was playing, Ambassador. He caught the maintenance drone because it was moving and his instincts took over. I simply redirected that energy into a game." A game. Krelthar said the word like he was tasting something unfamiliar. "We do not play games with other species. We do not play games at all. We train, we hunt, we prepare for survival." "With respect, Ambassador, Scarix is young," Kate said. "Young creatures of every species I have ever known need to play. It is how they learn, how they burn energy, how they develop skills. Playing chase and catch teaches the same skills as hunting, but without the violence." Krelthar looked at his son, who was still sitting hopefully near Kate, his eyes on the drone in her hands. "Scarix, come here." Scarix immediately obeyed, moving to his father's side. His tail lowered and his body shifted back into the disciplined posture expected of a young Vrexian. But Kate saw him glance back at her once, and she saw longing in that look. "We will discuss this later," Krelthar said. His voice was hard to read. He might have been angry. He might have been confused. He might have been something else entirely. "Return to our quarters, Scarix." The young Vrexian walked away, his steps slow and measured. But Kate noticed his tail. Despite his best efforts to keep it still, the tip kept twitching, small movements that betrayed his emotions. After Scarix left, Krelthar turned his full attention to Kate. The massive predator stepped closer, and Kate had to resist the urge to step back. He looked down at her with those yellow eyes, studying her like she was a puzzle he could not quite solve. "You took an object from my son while he was in hunting mode," Krelthar said. "You faced a Vrexian juvenile without fear. You initiated contact without permission. These are not normal behaviors for prey species." "I am not prey," Kate said, keeping her voice level. "And neither is Scarix a mindless predator. He is a young person who was bored and saw something moving. I have worked with animals my whole life, Ambassador. I know the difference between an attack and play behavior." "My son does not know how to play," Krelthar said. "We do not teach such things." "Maybe you should," Kate replied, then immediately wondered if she had gone too far. But Krelthar did not respond with anger. Instead, he continued to study her with that intense gaze. "You are unusual for your species, Lieutenant Kate Morrison. I will consider what has happened here." He turned and walked away, his massive form moving with deadly grace. The corridor slowly emptied as people returned to their duties, though Kate heard them talking in excited whispers as they left. Jake Sullivan was the last to approach her. He looked at the destroyed drone in her hands, then at Kate, then back at the drone. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Probably both," Kate admitted. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "But it worked." "You played fetch with a Vrexian," Jake said, like he still could not quite believe it. "You played fetch with a predator from a death world and he brought the toy back. Do you understand what that means?" Kate looked down at the mangled drone. "It means Scarix wanted to play. It means that underneath all the scales and claws and training, he is still a kid who needs more than just lessons in diplomacy and hunting." "It means more than that," Jake said quietly. "It means you just did something no other species has ever managed." The science division of Station Kepler 7 went into full alert mode after the incident with Scarix and the maintenance drone. Dr. Richard Hayes, the station's lead xenobiologist, called an emergency meeting 2 hours after the event. Kate found herself sitting in a conference room with 6 scientists who could not stop replaying the security footage. "Run it again," Richard said for what had to be the 10th time. On the screen, Kate watched herself throw the drone, watched Scarix chase it with obvious excitement, watched him bring it back to her like a dog with a ball. The scientists leaned forward, studying every detail. Dr. Helen Foster, who had been in the trade negotiations, shook her head in disbelief. "This should not be possible. The Vrexians are obligate predators. Their psychology does not include concepts like cooperative play with other species." "But it happened," said Dr. Lisa Chen, who specialized in animal behavior studies. "We can see it happening right here on the screen. That young Vrexian is exhibiting classic play behavior. The elevated tail, the excited vocalizations, the immediate return to the human with the object. Those are all signs of recreational engagement." Richard pulled up a second screen showing comparison footage. "Look at this. This is from 6 months ago when the Crystalline Collective tried to give gifts to a different Vrexian juvenile. The young Vrexian destroyed the objects immediately and showed signs of aggression. No play behavior at all. No engagement. He switched to another clip. This is from a year ago. The Aquarian delegation attempted musical interaction with a Vrexian youth. The response was negative. The young Vrexian perceived it as either a threat or irrelevant noise. So what makes Lieutenant Morrison different? Lisa asked, turning to look at Kate. What did you do that all these other species could not? Kate had been asking herself the same question. I did not do anything special. I just saw a kid who was bored and did what I would do with any young animal that had too much energy. But that is the point, Lisa said, her excitement growing. You saw a young animal. Every other species has seen a predator. They approach the Vrexian juveniles with fear or with formal diplomatic protocols. You approached Scarix like he was a puppy in a shelter. Richard brought up another file on his screen. I have been researching human history. Did you know humans are the only known species in the galaxy that regularly domesticates other predators for companionship? Domestication is common, Helen pointed out. Many species keep animals for food or labor. Not companionship, Richard corrected. Humans keep predators in their homes. Wolves became dogs. Wildcats became house cats. You have birds of prey that you train to hunt with you. You have even kept bears, big cats, and other dangerous predators as companions throughout your history. No other species does this. Lisa stood up, pacing as she worked through the idea. Humans spent thousands of years learning to communicate with predators through play. You learned to read their body language, to understand the difference between play aggression and real aggression. You developed instincts for it. 50,000 years with dogs, Jake Sullivan said from where he had been standing quietly by the door. He had been invited to the meeting as a security consultant but had stayed silent until now. That is how long humans and wolves have been together. We did not domesticate them through force. We did it through building relationships. Through play, Richard pointed at Jake. Exactly. And that is genetic memory now. Humans instinctively know how to interact with predators in ways that other species never learned. You see potential friends where others see threats. Kate thought about her years at the animal shelter, about learning to read the body language of scared dogs who had been abused, about teaching aggressive animals to trust again, about playing with puppies to socialize them. It had all seemed so natural to her. She had never considered it might be a uniquely human skill. So what does this mean for the negotiations? Helen asked. And more importantly, what does it mean for Scarix? That was the question that had been worrying Kate. Ambassador Krelthar did not seem angry, but he did not seem happy either. I do not know if I helped or hurt the diplomatic process. You did something unprecedented, Richard said. You formed a recreational bond with a species that supposedly cannot form those bonds. The question is, what happens next? They got their answer the next morning when Kate received a message requesting her presence in the Rexian quarters. She went with a mix of hope and dread, not sure if she was about to be thanked or banned from any future contact with Scarix. Ambassador Krelthar met her at the entrance to their section. The massive Vrexian looked even more imposing in the high-gravity environment of his quarters. Lieutenant Morrison, come with me. He led her through several corridors to a room that appeared to be a family area. Scarix was there, practicing what looked like combat forms. His movements were precise and controlled, each strike and parry executed with deadly efficiency. But when Kate entered, his head snapped toward her and his tail gave one excited twitch before he controlled it. Scarix, Krelthar said, continue your practice. The young Vrexian returned to his forms, but Kate noticed his movements were slightly less focused than before. His eyes kept darting toward her. Krelthar gestured for Kate to follow him to a corner of the room where they could talk privately. I have spent the night researching your species, he said without preamble. I have learned about your relationship with creatures you call dogs, about how you transformed wild predators into companions. Kate nodded, not sure where this was going. I have also observed my son, Krelthar continued. Since yesterday he has been different, more energetic, more focused. When I asked him about the incident with the drone, he spoke with more excitement than I have heard from him in seasons. He said it was fun. We do not have a direct translation for that word in our language. We have survival, success, victory, but not fun. Fun is important, Kate said carefully, especially for the young. It teaches them skills they need, but in a way that makes them want to learn. Krelthar watched his son practice. The Vrexian way is harsh. We prepare our young for a harsh universe. We teach them to be strong, to be fierce, to never show weakness. But I begin to wonder if we have forgotten something in our focus on strength. He turned his yellow gaze back to Kate. My son responds to you. He trusts you. This is unusual. Vrexian young do not trust easily, especially not prey species. I want to understand why. Maybe because I did not treat him like a predator, Kate suggested. I treated him like a kid who needed to play. And that is what confuses me, Krelthar said. You are not afraid? You took an object from him while he was in hunting mode. You faced him directly. These are not the behaviors of prey, yet you are soft, small, weak by our standards. How do you do this? Kate thought about how to explain it. In human history, we learned that strength is not just physical. Yes, we are softer than Vrexians. We cannot match your claws or your speed or your power. But we learned to build relationships with creatures stronger than us. We learned that trust can be more powerful than fear. Trust, Krelthar repeated. He was quiet for a long moment. I have a proposal, Lieutenant Morrison. The negotiations are going well. We will likely reach an agreement in the coming days, but during our remaining time on this station, I would like you to spend time with Scarix. Help him understand this concept of play. Show him what you showed him yesterday. Kate felt surprise and relief flood through her. You want me to play with your son? I want him to learn something beyond hunting and fighting, Krelthar said. I want him to understand other species better. And perhaps I want to see if this trust you speak of can exist between Vrexians and humans. If it can, it would change much about how we interact with the galaxy. I would be honored, Kate said. Krelthar called to his son. Scarix, Lieutenant Morrison will be visiting each day during the negotiations. You will spend time with her. You will learn from her. Do you understand? Scarix's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Yes, father. His tail was sweeping back and forth with barely contained excitement. Over the following days, Kate and Scarix developed a routine. Every afternoon after the morning negotiations ended, they would meet in one of the station's observation decks. Kate started bringing objects from around the station. A rubber ball from the gym that could survive Vrexian claws. A length of thick rope from the maintenance section that was perfect for tug-of-war. A broken stylus that squeaked when pressed, which Scarix found endlessly amusing. The first few sessions were watched by security officers who were ready to intervene if things went wrong. But as days passed and it became clear that Scarix was gentle with Kate, even careful not to hurt her with his claws, the security presence relaxed. Kate learned to read Scarix's body language. She learned that when his tail was high and sweeping, he was happy and excited. When it was still, he was focused or unsure. When the tip twitched rapidly, he was thinking. His growls had variations too. The deep rumbling was contentment. The shorter, sharper sounds were play aggression. The quiet churring noise was curiosity. Scarix learned from Kate too. He learned to be gentle when taking objects from her hands, retracting his claws so he would not scratch her. He learned that when she raised her hand in a certain way. The trade negotiations concluded successfully on the 10th day of the Vrexian delegation's visit. Both sides had reached agreements that would benefit their peoples for years to come. Humans would have access to medical compounds that could save millions of lives. Vrexians would have access to rare metals that would advance their technology by decades. The formal signing ceremony was scheduled for the next morning, and then the Vrexian delegation would depart. Kate knew this was coming, but it still made her chest feel tight when she thought about it. She had spent nearly 2 weeks with Scarix, and in that time, something had developed between them that she had not expected. It was not just that she had taught him to play, he had taught her something too. She had learned that the lines between predator and prey, between dangerous and safe, between alien and familiar, were not as solid as everyone thought. She had learned that curiosity and joy were universal, that the desire for connection existed across species barriers that were supposed to be impossible to cross. On their last afternoon together, Kate met Scarix at the observation deck as usual. The young Vrexian was already there, waiting by the massive windows that looked out into space. The nebula beyond painted the darkness with colors that shifted from purple to blue to pink, a cosmic display that never looked the same twice. Tomorrow you leave, Kate said, sitting down on the floor near him. She had learned that Scarix preferred when she sat down. It made her less tall, less threatening, more approachable. Scarix settled beside her, his massive form surprisingly graceful. Yes, we return home. Father says the negotiations were very successful. He says humans will make good trading partners. I am glad, Kate said. She pulled out the rubber ball she had been using for their games. Want to play one more time? Scarix looked at the ball, then at her. I will miss this. Playing. On my world, there are no games like this. Only training. Only preparing for survival. Maybe you can change that, Kate suggested. You have learned to play now. Maybe you can teach others. Other Vrexians will not understand, Scarix said, his voice carrying a note of sadness that sounded too adult for someone his age. They will say I have become soft. That spending time with humans has made me weak. Kate threw the ball. Scarix chased it automatically, his body responding to the game they had played dozens of times. He caught it in his jaws, trotted back, and dropped it at her feet. But his movements lacked their usual enthusiasm. You are not weak, Kate said firmly. You are learning something that your people have not learned yet. That strength comes in many forms. Yes, you are a predator. Yes, you are fierce and fast and powerful. But you are also capable of trust and joy and friendship. Those things do not make you weak. They make you more complete. Scarix tilted his head, considering her words. You really believe that? I know that, Kate said. I have seen it. You are gentle with me even though you could hurt me easily. You control your strength. You think before you act. Those are signs of true power, not weakness. They played for another hour, both trying to ignore the fact that it was their last session. Kate threw the ball and the rope and the squeaky stylus. Scarix chased and caught and returned them all, his earlier sadness fading into the joy of the moment. Other station residents had gathered to watch, as they often did now. The sight of a human and a Vrexian playing together had become one of the station's most popular attractions. When the session finally ended, Scarix did not want to leave. He sat by the window looking out at the stars. Kate sat beside him, comfortable in the silence. On my world, Scarix said eventually, we have a tradition. When a hunter respects another, they give them something of value, something that represents their bond. He reached into a pouch at his side and pulled out an object. Kate gasped when she saw it. It was a carving small enough to fit in her palm, made from what looked like polished black stone. But as Scarix placed it in her hands, Kate realized it was not stone. It was a piece of Vrexian scale, one that Scarix had shed as he grew. The carving showed two figures, a small human throwing something, and a Vrexian cub leaping after it. Every detail was perfect, from the human's outstretched arm to the Vrexian's extended claws. The two figures were captured in a moment of pure motion and joy. You made this? Kate asked, her voice catching slightly. I worked on it every night, Scarix said. Father taught me carving when I was very young. He says it helps train precision and control. I wanted to make something for you. Something to remember this time. Kate held the carving carefully, feeling the warmth of it in her hands. It was smooth and perfectly balanced, clearly the work of many hours of careful effort. Scarix, this is beautiful. Thank you, Scarix replied, for teaching me that there is more to life than hunting, for showing me that strength and joy can exist together, for being my friend even though your species and mine are supposed to be predator and prey. Kate felt tears starting in her eyes and did not try to hide them. You will do great things, Scarix. I know you will. And maybe someday when you are older and making decisions for your people, you will remember what you learned here, that different species can be friends, that trust is possible. I will remember, Scarix promised. How could I forget the human who taught a predator to play? They sat together by the window until the station's lights dimmed for the evening cycle. Finally, Scarix stood to leave. He looked down at Kate one more time, his yellow eyes warm. Goodbye, Kate Morrison. May your hunts be successful and your pack strong. It was a traditional Vrexian blessing, one that was usually only given between warriors. Kate smiled through her tears. Goodbye, Scarix. May your claws stay sharp and your heart stay open. The next morning, the formal signing ceremony took place in the main conference room. Ambassador Krelthar and the human delegation's senior officers signed the trade agreements, while dozens of witnesses from various species watched. It was a historic moment, the beginning of regular trade between humans and Vrexians. After the ceremony, Kate stood in the docking bay with the rest of the station crew to see the Vrexian delegation off. The massive predators walked toward their ship, their claws clicking on the metal floor. Scarix walked beside his father, his posture straight and formal. But as they reached the airlock, Scarix turned back one more time. He caught Kate's eye across the crowd. Then he did something that made every Vrexian in the delegation freeze in shock. He raised his clawed hand and waved, a distinctly human gesture. Kate waved back, tears streaming down her face openly now. The Vrexians boarded their ship, and the airlock sealed. Within minutes, the vessel had undocked and begun its journey back to Vrexian space. Kate watched until it disappeared from view, becoming just another point of light among the stars. That was remarkable, a voice said behind her. Dr. Richard Hayes had approached while she was watching the ship leave. I have compiled all my research into a report. It is going to change everything we know about interspecies relations. What will happen now? Kate asked. Everything, Richard said simply. The Vrexians have agreed to allow human observers to visit their world. Other predator species that have been isolated are reaching out, asking if humans can help them understand their own young better. The Galactic Council wants to establish programs based on what you did here. You created a template for how different species can connect. Kate looked down at the carving Scarix had given her, which she now wore on a chain around her neck. I just played fetch with a kid who was bored. No, Richard corrected gently. You saw past the claws and the scales and the reputation. You saw a young person who needed connection and joy. That is a gift, Kate. That is something humans bring to the galaxy that no one else does. In the weeks and months that followed, Kate's actions on Station Kepler 7 rippled across known space. Her story spread through the galactic community, told and retold, analyzed and discussed. The footage of her playing with Scarix was watched billions of times across hundreds of worlds. The human ability to form bonds with predator species became recognized as a unique trait. Humanity's long history of domestication, of turning wolves into dogs and wildcats into companions, had given them instincts that other species lacked. They could see potential friends where others saw only threats. Trade routes that had been closed to human ships opened. Research partnerships formed with species that had previously avoided contact. Diplomatic missions that had failed for other species succeeded when humans were involved, because humans brought something new to the table. They brought the ability to play, to bond, to find common ground across seemingly impossible divides. A new field of study emerged called comparative play behavior, dedicated to understanding how different species could connect through recreational activities. Kate was offered positions at universities across human space, asked to teach what she knew, to help train the next generation of diplomats and xenobiologists. But the greatest impact was felt among the young. Across the galaxy, when juvenile members of predator species showed curiosity about other species, their elders began to remember the story of the Vrexian cub who learned to play. They began to wonder if their own young might benefit from similar experiences. 5 years later, Kate received a message from Vrexian space. It was from Scarix, now a young adult serving in his people's diplomatic corps. He told her about the changes on his world, about how he had introduced the concept of play to other young Vrexians, about how it was slowly changing their culture's approach to raising their young. He told her about a program he had started, bringing together young Vrexians and young humans for recreational exchanges, teaching them to play together, to understand each other, to build friendships that would last their entire lives. He told her that the Vrexian word for friendship had changed. It used to only mean alliance or pack. Now it meant something deeper, something that included the concept of chosen bonds and shared joy. The word that best translated it to human language was simply play partner. Kate read the message in her quarters on Station Kepler 7, where she still worked as a diplomatic liaison. She touched the carved figure that still hung around her neck, remembering the young Vrexian who had chased a drone down a corridor and discovered that life could include joy as well as survival. She thought about all the young creatures across the galaxy who were learning to play together now, building bridges between species that were supposed to be natural enemies. She thought about how a simple game of fetch had sparked a revolution in how the galaxy understood connection and trust. And she smiled, because she knew that somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, a former predator cub was teaching others the lesson he had learned on this station. That strength was not diminished by joy. That predators and prey could be friends. That the capacity for play was not a weakness but a strength that brought people together. All because one day, a young Vrexian had growled over a toy. A human had taken it, flung it down a corridor, and watched as it came running back. And in that simple moment, everything had changed. The universe was a little less divided, a little more connected, a little more willing to see past claws and teeth to the person underneath. And it had all started with a game.